Hello Internet. So today we're in a bit of a different venue. This is my shed. You have to excuse the background noises. They're currently preparing for the VE Day celebrations. So anyway, what I wanted to do was a quick video on my plans for a Raspberry Pi. So I really like the Raspberry Pi. Here we've got the Raspberry Pi Model 3B Plus. Now the thing that's always irritated me about the Raspberry Pi is the fact that you have connections on both sides. So you have the power, the HDMI, the audio, and then you've got your USB and your Ethernet. But the problem with it is if you start plugging things in, you end up with cables coming out this way and cables coming out that way. And also the cases aren't particularly brilliant. So they're all really tiny. And I was thinking, well, I'd like really to have the Raspberry Pi with all the connections in, but in some better case. So I went on the hunt for a larger case and I came across this. So this is a Macintosh Performa 400 case. It's an LC case from the Apple LC series, and it was £8 on eBay, and I thought, oh, there should be lots of room inside that to be able to make a Raspberry Pi computer. So what I did was I retro-brighted it because it was a bit yellowed over time. And what I intend to do is I'm going to be putting a power switch here and then a kettle cable in, and then we're going to have VGA out. I'm not going to use the two serial ports. There's going to be two USB ports in here, and I've got an ADB to USB converter, so that's going to go in there. And then I've also got a 3.5mm headphone jack and microphone in. Excuse me, there's a wasp that's just come in. I'm not going to be using this part where the Ethernet connection would go. Let me just get rid of that wasp. Right, wasp has been dealt with. So, if we open up the case, what I've done is, I've already removed the metal shielding from the top, and I was going to remove the metal shielding from the bottom, but the case looks like this, so I'm going to have problems mounting the Raspberry Pi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some double-sided sticky tape and stick down the various components there. What I need to do is I need to fashion a board across the back that I can mount my connections to. So I bought this piece of perspex. It's 3mm thick, it's matte black, and it's just the right width. So I shall be cutting that down and then drilling some holes through it. And then we have the kettle cable, and then we have the power switch, just like that. So they'll be mounted in the perspex somehow. I don't know quite how I'm going to drill through this, but I'm not a professional. Then what we need to do is we need to solder the connections on here to the switch, so we have an on-off switch on the back, and then we're going to be using this 4-port or 5-port USB hub charger. Sorry, 5-port USB charger, it's not a hub. What we're going to do is the figure of 8 is going to go in the back of there, and then we're going to cut the cable off, and then we're going to solder the two wires in here, one onto here, well actually both onto there, but then one from there to there, and then back again. So we'll have plug in the power at the back, we'll switch it on, and at the point of switching it on the whole machine should turn on. So this little device here, this is called a ADB to USB, and it's from Drackware.com. I bought this a few weeks back, and it's one of the smallest ADB to USB converters that I've seen, and on the back we've got micro USB, so I've got a micro USB to USB type A on the back there, so that plugs into there, and it's got this 3D printed case on. Now I haven't tried to take it to pieces to see how I'm going to mount it, but I'm thinking I'm going to cut a hole in the perspex and slip it through and then somehow kind of epoxy it on. Which will be interesting because I haven't got any epoxy at the moment. We've then got a 2-port USB hub, so that will be plugging into the back of the Raspberry Pi, and that will give us our 2 USB ports on the back. And then next to that, these two are going to be blanked out like I said. The next we have a HDMI to VGA, and that's going to go in the back there. Now I have taken the housing to pieces, so I believe it's going to be a little bit easier to mount in the perspex, and also I don't want it to be too flush. I want the VGA port to stick out a little bit, so it's going to be easier to plug the cable in. What else have we got? So I happen to have a 250GB SSD lying around, so I thought, well, why not stick that in? Now I have been reading the performance of SSD, depending on the kind of SD card that you've got, should kind of improve the performance a little bit, but the problem with the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus is it's only USB 2, which means a maximum data throughput of about 60 megabytes a second, so probably be a little bit better than the SD card that I've got in there at the moment. I'm not sure what it's rated at. It's a little Kingston 16 gig, but we won't be using that. Well, we will be to start off with, but then we'll get rid of it and we'll be booting from USB. That just means that I've got 250 gigabytes of storage to run my VMs and my emulators. So yeah, that's about where I am with the project at the moment. I'm going to try and get started. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I've only done the most basic of soldering. I don't really have any way of telling which cable in here is the live and the neutral, other than what it says on the plug here. And I guess if I follow the lead down, then I can figure it out. But because this can go in either which way, it doesn't really matter. What I need to do for the kettle plug is I need to make sure that I cover all of these, so I'm not going to be shorting anything out, and likewise on the switch as well. So I've got my all sorted heat shrink wire wraps, which I'm going to hopefully stick on there once I've soldered it on, and then apply some heat, and then that will shrink it down, and hopefully that will make it nice and snug, and then we won't be able to short it out very easily. Now we're not going to be using ground or earth as we call it in the UK, because this plug only has 2 cables on. What I do need to do is I need to remove this metal shield here. I need to cut off this end here because this is getting in the way. Now I was hoping to be able to do this mod so we could reverse any changes that we'd made in the future, but this was sold just as the case. There was no motherboard, power supply, floppy drive, etc. So I don't really think anybody would be that interested in trying to get it back into perfect condition again, so I'm okay with removing this bit, and I'm just going to use some snips to cut that bit off. Also, I've removed it from the top because I was a bit worried about the metal interfering with the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth signal. Now I'm not going to be using Bluetooth, but I'm going to be using Wi-Fi because I haven't bought anything to connect the Ethernet to the back port there. So at the moment I want to make sure that I don't have anything that interferes with the Wi-Fi. And basically the top case, I'm hoping once it's on it should allow the signals through. We've also got some holes here for cooling and things. So and also actually what I was going to do was at the front of the top case here we have the floppy drive connector, or the floppy drive hole I should say, and I'm also planning on cutting a bit of this because I have plenty of this left over, and just putting that over there because I thought it might look a bit better than just having a gaping hole in the case. So that's part one. Hopefully part two I'll be able to start cutting things. Now looking at the back of this case, I think I'm going to have to trim these pieces off so I can get my perspex in. Ideally I'd want, you know, one nice big long piece like that, because this fits quite nicely inside the case actually. I think I'm going to just have to round the corners off a little bit, but yeah, I need to think a little bit about how I'm going to mount all this in. I'm still not sure how I'm going to mount this to the back of the case at the moment. I think probably just some glue, and then yeah, I think I'm going to focus on the back here and try and remove these somehow, just so I've got enough room to put the perspex. Right, I think that's about it for that. Right, so here's a piece of perspex that I've cut. I've sanded down as best as I can. Still got a few little nicks in it, but you're not going to see it. So this, I had a bit of a problem actually. I scored the perspex when I was snapping it. The bit where the power supply went kind of snapped diagonally off, so I've cut it off here, and I'm going to have another piece of perspex just here. But here we have a nice snug fit, which I'm really pleased about. So there we are. Now this, as I say, is going to be attached probably at the back with some glue. But yeah, it fits quite nicely, and I quite like the way it looks at the moment. It's a bit dusty, but... So what we next need to do is drill some holes in it for the audio, the USB and the VGA, oh, and the ADB. But I need to tidy up. I've made a bit of a mess. Here's the bit that snapped, so I don't think I cut it deep enough. So I've got the right measurements now. I can just cut another piece of acrylic or perspex, whatever, and then cut it, and hopefully that should be a lot easier. Because the problem that I've had, and I didn't realise, is there's a lip here. So although I measured up to the lip, I've had to sand off quite a bit to get it nice and snug in there. That's taken a bit of time. And there's also this where you would put the screw in to keep the case closed. That needed a little bit of sanding out as well. So there's a little notch down the bottom here to go in here, and you probably can't see it on camera, but there's a little notch just there, and that goes onto there. So if I just take this off the protecting sheet, you can see matte black, both sides. I'll just go in there like that. And we'll glue it in when we have some glue. So off camera, I made another piece. And that's just going to go in there. That's nice and flush. Take this off. I'll probably regret doing this, because I need to drill some holes. Now there is a slight gap at the bottom. I think I might have to attack the case a little bit more, but that's basically how that's going to go. And then if I can find them, here we are. This plug is going to go in. Actually, if we draw, yeah, I know I shouldn't have taken that off. Oh well. So I need to cut that out and cut that out, and then I can fit them, and then I can start soldering. So I need to have a think about how I'm going to cut these holes, because I don't really have the right equipment. Right, well, it's not perfect because I don't have the right tools. I've managed to get them in. I'll be able to secure these in position with some glue properly. The on-off switch is slightly skew-if, and I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to get the kettle cable in. If not, I'm going to have to trim on this side and pull this way slightly. But yeah, not bad considering I'm an amateur. Right, people. Moment of truth. Okay, well, after fanning around for absolutely ages, I think my switch is no good because every time I wire it in, it doesn't work. So here's the kettle cable, and it's wired straight in. So if I plug that in and I plug this in to the back of there, we have lights on the Raspberry Pi, so we know that that's working. So I'm going to have to order a new switch, and I'm going to give up today because I've made a mess and it's taken much longer than I thought it would. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.